My name is Angelina, and at 28 years old, I received the text that shattered everything I believed about family. My sister Madison had been planning her wedding for 6 months, and we'd always been close growing up in Connecticut. Then came that Thursday evening when my phone lit up with her message. "You're not invited. It's a classy wedding." When I called my mother Dorothy, she agreed with Madison, saying it was for the best. That's when I decided to make my own plans. Before I share what happened next, let me know where you're watching from. And please like and subscribe if you've ever felt excluded by your own family. Sometimes the people who should love us most are the ones who hurt us deepest. And this story might just give you the strength to rise above their rejection. Growing up in suburban Connecticut, I thought Madison and I had the perfect sisterhood. She was 3 years older than me, always the one our parents held up as the golden child. Our house on Maple Street looked like any other middle-class home white picket fence. And all but inside, the dynamics were already taking shape for what would eventually tear us apart. Madison excelled at everything she touched. Straight A student captain of the debate team, accepted into Yale on a full scholarship. I was different, more artistic and free-spirited, preferring to spend my afternoons painting in the garage or writing stories in my journal. Where Madison saw life as a series of achievements to unlock, I saw it as an experience to be felt and lived. Our father Thomas understood me. He'd been an artist himself before taking a job in insurance to support the family. He'd sneak into my room at night and look at my paintings, telling me they reminded him of his younger days, when he still believed he could change the world with his art. We'd sit on the back porch, and he'd tell me stories about the year he spent in Paris, trying to make it as a painter before responsibility called him home. Madison would roll her eyes at these conversations. She was already interning at law firms during summer breaks, networking with partners, building her resume. She'd tell me I needed to get serious about life, that art wouldn't pay the bills. Mom always took her side, praising Madison's practical mindset, while suggesting I might want to consider a backup plan for my creative dreams. When Dad passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I lost my biggest supporter. The funeral was the last time our family truly felt united. Madison flew in from New York, where she was working at a prestigious law firm. She held me as I sobbed at the graveside, promising we'd always have each other. That promise would prove to be as fragile as morning dew. After Dad died, the divide between Madison and me grew wider. She threw herself even deeper into her career-making partner at 31, buying a luxury condo in Manhattan, dating men who wore watches that cost more than my annual salary. I took a different path, getting my teaching degree from the state university, accepting a position at Riverside Elementary School in our hometown. The salary was modest, but the joy of watching 6-year-olds learn to read made every day worthwhile. Then I met Jack during my second year of teaching. He was charming, worked in sales, and seemed to adore me. We married quickly, maybe too quickly, in a small ceremony at City Hall. Madison attended, but spent the reception on her phone handling some urgent case. When I got pregnant with Emma a year later, I thought life was finally falling into place. But Jack wasn't ready for fatherhood. The crying, the sleepless nights, the responsibility, it all became too much for him. When Emma was 2, I came home from work to find his closet empty and a note on the kitchen counter. "I can't do this anymore," it read. "I need to find myself." Just like that, I became a single mother, struggling to make ends meet on a teacher's salary while raising a toddler alone. Madison's reaction to my divorce was less than supportive. She told me she'd seen it coming, that Jack had never been good enough for our family anyway. When I needed help with childcare so I could work summer school to make extra money, she said she was too busy with her cases. When Emma got sick and I missed a week of work unpaid to care for her, Madison suggested I should have made better life choices. Mom sided with Madison, as she always did. She'd make comments about how I should have been more careful, should have seen the signs, should have married someone more stable. The subtext was clear. I should have been more like Madison. Despite everything, I built a good life for Emma and me. Our apartment was small but cozy. Emma's artwork covered the refrigerator. We had Friday pizza nights and Saturday morning pancake traditions. I became the teacher known for never giving up on any student, probably because I knew what it felt like to have people give up on you. 8 months ago, I met Marcus. He came to fix my car when it broke down in the school parking lot. He owned a small auto repair shop in town, had grease under his fingernails, and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen. He made Emma laugh with silly jokes and never minded when she wanted to see the engines he was working on. He was patient, genuine, and treated us both like we were precious. When I told Madison about Marcus, her first question was about his education. When I said he'd gone to trade school, not college, I could hear her disappointment through the phone. When she finally met him at Mom's birthday dinner, she spent the evening making subtle digs about blue-collar work and asking if he had ambitions beyond fixing cars. Marcus handled it with grace, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. Afterward, he asked if my family would ever accept him. I told him they would come around, that they just needed time. Looking back, I was lying to both of us. 6 months ago, Madison announced her engagement to Christopher Wellington III. His family owned hedge funds vacation homes in the Hamptons and had their name on a wing at the Metropolitan Museum. The engagement ring could have paid off my student loans 3 times over. Madison called me immediately after he proposed, gushing about the romantic proposal on his yacht, the champagne, the sunset over the harbor. I was genuinely happy for her. Despite our differences, she was still my sister. When she asked me to be her maid of honor, I cried with joy. Finally, I thought we could reconnect through this celebration. I started a Pinterest board for wedding ideas, researched venues, looked at bridesmaid dresses online. Emma was excited about being a flower girl, practicing walking slowly and throwing petals in our living room. The first sign of trouble came during the initial wedding planning dinner. Madison had created a presentation complete with color schemes, mood boards, and a strict timeline. The wedding would be elegant, sophisticated, and exclusive. When I suggested including some of Dad's favorite songs in the reception playlist, she dismissed it as too sentimental. When I mentioned that Emma was excited about her flower girl duties, Madison said she was considering hiring a professional child model instead, to ensure the photos were perfect. As the weeks passed, I found myself gradually excluded from planning sessions. Madison would schedule venue visits during my work hours, knowing I couldn't take time off. She'd go dress shopping with her lawyer friends on weekends when I had Emma and no babysitter. When I confronted her about it, she said I wouldn't understand the aesthetic she was going for, that our tastes were too different. The engagement party was when I truly realized how much Madison had changed, or maybe how she'd always been, and I just refused to see it. It was held at the Whitmore Country Club, the kind of place with a year-long waiting list and membership fees that could fund a small school. I pulled up in my 10-year-old Toyota Corolla, parking between a Bentley and a Mercedes, immediately feeling out of place. Inside, Madison glided between groups of Christopher's family and friends, all of them looking like they'd stepped out of a Ralph Lauren catalog. When she introduced me, it was always as her sister, who teaches elementary school, said, in a tone that suggested I worked in waste management. Christopher's mother, Eleanor Wellington, asked me about my little job, and whether I found it fulfilling to work with other people's children all day. Marcus had offered to come with me, but Madison said the invitation was just for me. Now, I stood alone, holding a glass of champagne that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, watching my sister pretend I barely existed. The exclusion escalated gradually, like a pot slowly coming to boil. 2 weeks after the engagement party, Madison called to inform me about a change in the bridal party arrangements. She'd decided that having her law school best friend Penelope as maid of honor would be more appropriate. Penelope understood the social circles they'd be navigating, she explained. I would still be a bridesmaid, of course, just not the maid of honor. I swallowed my hurt and agreed, telling myself that what mattered was supporting my sister. Emma asked why Aunt Madison didn't want me to be the special helper anymore, and I had to lie, saying there had been a mix-up with the planning. The dress shopping incident happened 3 weeks later. Madison had texted me earlier in the week about looking at bridesmaid dresses on Saturday. I arranged for Emma to have a play date, excited to finally be included in something meaningful. But when Saturday came, she didn't respond to my texts asking for the time and location. That evening, I opened Instagram to see photos of Madison with 5 women I barely knew, all lawyers from her firm, holding champagne at an exclusive bridal boutique in Manhattan. The caption read, "Found the perfect dresses with my girls." The betrayal stung worse than any physical pain. When I called her, she claimed she'd sent me the details, but I must have missed them. We both knew she was lying. Christopher's family complicated everything further. They came from old money, the kind of wealth that had streets and libraries named after them. Eleanor Wellington had made it clear from the beginning that she had expected Christopher to marry within their social circle. At every gathering, she'd make pointed comments about breeding and pedigree, as if we were discussing show dogs rather than people. During a dinner at their estate, Eleanor asked about Emma's father. When I explained I was divorced, she actually clutched her pearls, a gesture I'd thought only existed in movies. She then spent the rest of the evening telling stories about the importance of choosing suitable partners and the statistics on children from broken homes. Madison sat there nodding along, never once defending me or Emma. The situation with Mom grew increasingly painful. Dorothy had always favored Madison, but now it became blatant. She'd called to talk about the wedding plans, gushing over the venue, the flowers, the designer Madison had chosen for her dress. When I mentioned feeling left out, she'd sigh and say I needed to understand Madison's position now. "Your sister is entering a different world," she told me one afternoon when I'd stopped by with Emma. "You have to accept that your lifestyles are incompatible. Maybe this is a chance for you to evaluate your own choices." When I asked what she meant, she looked pointedly at Emma, who was coloring at the kitchen table, and then mentioned Marcus's occupation. The breaking point in my relationship with Mom came when she suggested I should be grateful Madison was including me at all. After all, she said, "You're a single mother dating a mechanic. What would Christopher's family think?" The words hung between us like a blade. I gathered Emma and left my hands shaking as I buckled her into her car seat. Meanwhile, Marcus remained my rock through everything. He never complained when I cried on his shoulder about the latest slight. He'd take Emma to the park so I could have time to process my feelings. He even offered to talk to Madison himself, though I knew that would only make things worse. Marcus came from a working-class family who valued loyalty and honest work. He couldn't understand how family could treat each other this way. The conflict over Emma's birthday perfectly captured how far Madison and I had drifted apart. Emma's 7th birthday fell on the same weekend as Madison's bachelorette party in Miami. When Madison told me the dates, I reminded her about Emma's birthday. She rolled her eyes and said I could celebrate it the weekend before or after. When I explained that Emma had been planning her birthday for months, that her friends were already invited, Madison accused me of being selfish and trying to sabotage her wedding. She said a good sister would prioritize the bachelorette party, that Emma wouldn't even remember this birthday in a few years. The fact that she could dismiss my daughter so easily told me everything I needed to know about her priorities. I chose Emma, of course. Her birthday party was magical with a unicorn theme and a homemade castle cake I'd spent 3 nights decorating. Madison posted passive-aggressive updates from Miami about how sad it was when family let you down. Her friends commented with sympathy, not knowing the real story. The dinner where Marcus met the extended family was a disaster I should have seen coming. Madison had insisted on hosting it at an upscale restaurant, the kind where the menu didn't have prices, and the portions were artistically small. Marcus wore his best shirt, had gotten a fresh haircut, and brought flowers for both Madison and Mom. Madison spent the evening interrogating him like he was on trial. She asked about his business plan, his financial projections, whether he'd considered getting a real degree. When he explained that he loved working with his hands, that there was honor in honest labor, she actually laughed. She made jokes about grease and oil stains, asked if he knew which fork to use for salad, and wondered aloud how I'd gone from being married to a man in sales to dating someone who fixed cars. Christopher joined in making comments about how skilled trades were becoming obsolete with electric vehicles, how automation would replace mechanics within a decade. Marcus responded with dignity, explaining the complexity of modern automotive systems, the continuous education required to stay current with technology. But I could see the hurt in his eyes, the way his jaw tightened with each insult disguised as conversation. Later that night, Marcus asked me a question that broke my heart. "Do you ever wish I was different? More like what they want for you?" I told him I wouldn't change a single thing about him, that their opinion meant nothing compared to the love and stability he'd brought to Emma's and my life. But the damage was being done slowly, steadily, like water eroding stone. Madison's wedding planning became increasingly extravagant. The venue was changed twice, each location more expensive than the last. The guest list grew to include senators, CEOs, and social media influencers. She hired a wedding planner who had organized celebrity weddings, a photographer who'd shot for Vogue, a florist who'd done the White House Christmas decorations. Every conversation with her became about the wedding. She'd called to complain about the stress of choosing between Cartier and Tiffany for her jewelry, while I was calculating whether I could afford both Emma's dental work and new school shoes this month. The disconnect between our realities became a chasm too wide to bridge. 3 months before the wedding, I ran into Madison's wedding planner, Vivian, at a coffee shop. She recognized me and asked if I was excited about my sister's big day. When I mentioned I was a bridesmaid, she looked confused. She pulled out her tablet, scrolled through lists, and then awkwardly said my name wasn't on any of the documents she had. There must be a mistake, I said, but the pitying look in her eyes told me there wasn't. That Thursday evening started like any other. I was making Emma's favorite dinner, spaghetti with homemade meatballs, while she worked on her homework at the kitchen table. The spring rain tapped against our windows, creating a cozy atmosphere in our small apartment. Emma was telling me about her day, how she'd helped a classmate who was struggling with reading, when my phone buzzed on the counter. Madison's name appeared on the screen. I dried my hands on a dish towel and opened the message, expecting perhaps a question about wedding preparations or another change in plans. What I read instead made my legs weak. Angelina, after careful consideration and discussions with Christopher's family, we've decided to keep the wedding intimate and maintain certain standards for our special day. You're not invited. This isn't personal. It's about the image we need to project as we enter this new chapter. I hope you understand. Madison. I read it 3 times, certain I was misunderstanding. My hands started shaking so badly, I nearly dropped the phone. Emma looked up from her homework, her innocent face creased with concern. "Mommy, are you okay?" she asked. "You look sad." I forced a smile, told her everything was fine, that I just needed to make a phone call. I stepped onto our small balcony, closing the sliding door behind me, and called Madison. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. I called again. Same result. On the third try, a text came through. "This is final. Please respect our decision." My next call was to Mom. She answered on the second ring, and I could tell from her tone that she already knew. Madison had told her a week ago, and she'd been dreading this conversation. Dorothy's words cut deeper than Madison's text. "Sweetie, I understand you're upset, but Madison has a point about the image she needs to project. The Wellingtons have certain expectations. You're a single mother with a blue-collar boyfriend. How would that look in the wedding photos? Maybe this is a wake-up call to elevate yourself." I asked her if she was seriously taking Madison's side in excluding me from my own sister's wedding. Her silence was answer enough. "You could use this as motivation," she continued, "to improve your situation. Find a more suitable partner, focus on your career advancement. Madison's just trying to protect you from embarrassment." Embarrassment. I was struggling to keep my voice steady. The only embarrassing thing here is a mother who thinks her daughter isn't good enough for a party. "Don't be dramatic, Angelina. Not everything is about you." I hung up without saying goodbye, something I'd never done before. My hands were shaking with rage and hurt as I went back inside. Emma had set the table, even folding the napkins, the special way I'd taught her. The simple kindness of my 7-year-old daughter made the cruelty of my family even starker. Marcus arrived an hour later. I texted him simply, "I need you." He came straight from work, still in his coveralls, grease under his fingernails. When I showed him the message, his face went through several emotions. Shock, anger, then a protective fury that made me feel less alone. She actually wrote that it's about maintaining standards. He pulled me into his arms. "Angel, you're worth more than every person who'll be at that wedding combined." You know that, right? Emma had been watching from the hallway. She came over and wedged herself between us, wrapping her small arms around my waist. "We don't need mean Aunt Madison anyway," she declared. "We have each other." Marcus stayed the night, sleeping on the couch after Emma went to bed. We talked until 3 in the morning, him listening as I poured out years of hurt and rejection I'd been suppressing. He didn't try to fix anything, didn't offer empty platitudes. He just held my hand and reminded me that family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stand by you when everyone else walks away. The next morning, getting ready for work felt like moving through quicksand. Every task required enormous effort. Emma noticed making her own breakfast and packing her lunch without being asked. At 7 years old, she was showing more emotional maturity than my entire adult family. At school, I went through the motions of teaching, but my colleague Janet noticed something was wrong immediately. During lunch break, she found me crying in my classroom. I told her everything, and her reaction was swift and fierce. "That witch thinks she's too good for you." Janet's indignation was a balm to my wounded spirit. "Honey, you're the best teacher this school has ever seen. You've changed dozens of children's lives. What has Madison done besides make rich people richer?" The principal, Robert, must have heard from Janet because he stopped by my classroom after school. He didn't pry, just reminded me that the school community was family too, and family supports each other through difficult times. His kindness almost made me cry again. Over the next few days, word spread through subtle channels. Parents, who usually just waved at pickup, started stopping to chat. My fellow teachers left encouraging notes in my mailbox. The custodian, Frank, who'd worked at the school for 30 years, told me about when his own brother had excluded him from a family event for not being successful enough. He'd gone on to raise 3 kids who became doctors and teachers, while his brother's children struggled with addiction and entitlement. The family group chat situation delivered another blow. I noticed I hadn't seen any messages for days, which was unusual since Madison had been using it to coordinate wedding details. When I tried to access it, I discovered I'd been removed. My cousin Beth later told me Madison had announced she'd had to make some tough decisions about the guest list, implying I'd chosen not to attend rather than been excluded. The cruelty of that lie sparked something in me. It wasn't enough to exclude me. She had to rewrite the narrative to make herself the victim. I thought about all the times I defended her, made excuses for her behavior, convinced myself that deep down she still loved me. But love doesn't behave this way. Love doesn't measure worth by bank accounts and job titles. Marcus found me that evening, sitting on Emma's bed watching her sleep. She looked so peaceful, unaware of how cruel the world could be. He sat beside me and we watched her together in silence. "You know what we're going to do," he finally said. "We're going to show them that excluding you was the biggest mistake they ever made. Not through revenge or pettiness, but by living so well, so joyfully, that their expensive wedding will look hollow in comparison." I didn't know then how prophetic his words would be. The truth about Madison's deception began unraveling when my cousin Beth reached out a week after the text. She suggested we meet for coffee at a small cafe downtown, away from anywhere family might see us. Beth had always been the neutral party in family disputes, but I could tell from her urgent tone that she had something important to share. Beth arrived looking uncomfortable, fidgeting with her coffee cup before finally speaking. "Angelina, what Madison told everyone isn't true. She's saying you chose not to come because you couldn't afford an appropriate gift. She made it sound like you were embarrassed about your financial situation." The lie was so calculated, it took my breath away. Beth continued, revealing that Madison had been systematically poisoning the family against me for months. She'd told our aunts that I was jealous of her success, that I'd been making scenes at wedding events, that Marcus had been rude to Christopher's family. None of it was true, but the family believed Madison because she'd always been the golden child. "Eleanor Wellington is behind a lot of this," Beth added. She told Madison that having a single mother from a working-class background at the wedding would reflect poorly on the Wellington family reputation. She actually used the phrase, "maintaining the pedigree of the guest list." I learned the wedding venue had been changed to the Whitmore estate, with plates costing $500 per guest. The flower budget alone was more than my annual salary. Madison had hired a social media manager to curate the wedding's online presence, ensuring only the right kind of people were associated with the event. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at Madison's public social media profiles through a friend's account since she'd blocked me. Her posts were full of references to her curated guest list and maintaining quality over quantity in all aspects of life. Her friends commented with praise about her boundaries and high standards. One comment particularly stung. It read, "So brave of you to prioritize your vision over obligation." 3 days later, Jack called. My ex-husband and I hadn't spoken in months, our communication limited to brief texts about Emma's schedule when she visited him every other weekend. His voice was hesitant, uncertain. "Angelina, I heard about the wedding situation through mutual friends. I wanted you to know that what Madison's doing is wrong. I also think you should know something. Last year, when Emma was with me, Madison called. She referred to Emma as your baggage and suggested I should push for full custody so you could have a fresh start. She said Emma was holding you back from finding a quality partner. The revelation that Madison had tried to separate me from my daughter, had seen my precious Emma as baggage to be discarded, ignited a fury I didn't know I was capable of feeling. Jack continued saying he'd hung up on her and never told me because he didn't want to cause more family drama. But now, seeing how she was treating me, he felt I deserved to know the full extent of her cruelty. That weekend, Marcus's cousin Tony, who worked at the country club where Madison held her engagement party, revealed another piece of the puzzle. He'd been serving drinks when he overheard Madison telling her friends that she was embarrassed by me specifically mentioning that she didn't want that mechanic in any wedding photos. She'd actually laughed about how I downgraded from a sales executive to a grease monkey. Tony had wanted to dump a tray of drinks on her but needed his job. Instead, he'd been documenting every cruel thing she said, thinking I might need to know someday. The list he showed me was extensive, each comment more hurtful than the last. The financial control aspect became clear when I remembered our grandmother's trust fund. Grandma Rose had left both Madison and me $50,000 each with the stipulation that the older grandchild would act as executor. Madison had been delaying the release of my funds for 3 years, always claiming there were legal complications or paperwork issues. Now I understood it had been another form of control keeping me financially struggling while she lived in luxury. I called the lawyer who'd handled Grandma's estate. He was surprised to hear from me saying Madison had told him I wasn't interested in accessing the funds yet. Within a week, he'd discovered Madison had been collecting interest on my portion while keeping the principal frozen. It was legal but unethical, another example of her true character. Meanwhile, the Riverside Elementary Spring Carnival planning had begun. As head of the planning committee, I threw myself into the work, grateful for the distraction. We'd always held a modest carnival with simple games and bake sale items. But this year, I envisioned something spectacular. During a planning meeting, I suggested partnering with local businesses for sponsorships. The other teachers were enthusiastic, and parents began volunteering in unprecedented numbers. Word had somehow spread about my situation, though I'd never directly told anyone beyond Janet. The community was rallying around me without being asked. Marcus got his garage buddies involved, suggesting a vintage car show as part of the carnival. His friend Pete owned a 1967 Mustang. Another had a restored Chevelle. Soon, we had 20 classic car owners committed to displaying their vehicles. The local news station heard about the car show edition and expressed interest in covering the event. Emma became my little assistant, helping design flyers and coming up with game ideas. Her enthusiasm was infectious, reminding me that joy didn't require wealth or status. It simply required love and community, both of which we had in abundance. One evening, while reviewing carnival plans, my phone buzzed with a message from Madison. Despite not inviting me to the wedding, she had the audacity to ask where my wedding gift was. She reminded me that family supports family regardless of circumstances, and suggested a contribution to their honeymoon fund would be appropriate. The suggested amount was $2,000. I looked at the message, then at Emma coloring at the table, then at the carnival budget spreadsheet on my laptop. I made a decision. The money I might have spent on a wedding gift would go to the school carnival instead. I typed back a simple response. I've made a donation in your name to Riverside Elementary. Congratulations on your special day. Her response was immediate and furious, but I didn't read it. I blocked her number, something I should have done days ago. The relief was immediate and profound. The decision to not just survive, but thrive became my driving force. If Madison wanted to exclude me from her perfect wedding, I would create something even more meaningful on the same day. The Spring Carnival would be more than a school fundraiser. It would be a celebration of real community, genuine relationships, and the kind of love that doesn't measure worth by bank accounts. The transformation began with the Carnival Planning Committee. When I shared my vision of making this year's event extraordinary, the response was overwhelming. Parents who ran local businesses started offering sponsorships. The owner of Giuseppe's Italian restaurant volunteered to provide food at cost. The local print shop offered free banners and flyers. Everyone seemed to understand this was about more than just a school event. Marcus threw himself into organizing the car show component with infectious enthusiasm. He reached out to car clubs throughout the state, and soon we had commitments from 50 vintage car owners. His garage sponsored a booth where kids could learn about basic car maintenance and safety. He even arranged for a 1950s-style diner food truck to complement the automotive theme. Emma designed a logo for the carnival, a colorful drawing of children playing with vintage cars in the background. Her art teacher helped her refine it, and soon it was on every poster in town. She beamed with pride every time we passed one, pointing out her artwork to anyone who would listen. 3 weeks before the wedding, Madison texted me again, this time from Mom's phone since I'd blocked her number. She needed me to babysit Christopher's 5-year-old niece, who would be the flower girl. Despite not being invited to the wedding, family helps family, she wrote. The entitlement was breathtaking. I responded politely that I had prior commitments with the carnival setup and couldn't help. Madison called Mom immediately, who then called me furious that I was being petty and vindictive. I explained that I wasn't being vindictive. I was simply busy with my own life, a life they'd made clear I should keep separate from theirs. "You're trying to ruin Madison's special day," Mom accused. "Madison ruined any relationship we might have had when she decided I wasn't good enough for her wedding," I replied. "I'm not responsible for solving problems for an event I'm not invited to." The conversation ended with Mom calling me selfish and hanging up. It was liberating to realize I no longer cared about her opinion. Meanwhile, the carnival planning had attracted media attention. Sarah Williams from Channel 7 heard about a teacher organizing a massive community event and wanted to do a human interest story. When she interviewed me, I focused entirely on the school, the students, and the community support. I never mentioned the wedding or my family situation. But Sarah was perceptive. Off camera, she asked if there was more to the story. I simply said that communities come together when they recognize something special happening. She smiled knowingly and said the camera would be there on Carnival Day to capture what real celebration looked like. 2 weeks before the event, something magical started happening. Parents I'd never met started volunteering. Local businesses I hadn't approached offered donations. The high school drama club volunteered to do face painting. The fire department offered to bring a truck for kids to explore. The police department organized a bicycle safety course. The whole town seemed to be participating. Marcus had been acting mysteriously, having whispered conversations with Emma and disappearing for errands he wouldn't explain. When I pressed him, he just smiled and said I'd find out at the carnival. Emma giggled whenever I asked her what they were planning, her 7-year-old self barely able to contain the secret. The Wednesday before the wedding, I received an unexpected call from Eleanor Wellington. Christopher's mother's voice was crisp and businesslike. "Ms. Thompson, I understand there's a charitable event at your school this Saturday. The Wellington Foundation is always interested in supporting education. What would be an appropriate donation?" I was stunned into silence for a moment before professionally explaining our fundraising goals. She pledged $10,000 and said she might stop by if her schedule permitted. Something in her tone suggested she knew exactly what else was happening that day. Friday night, the day before both events, I couldn't sleep. Emma was at Jack's for the weekend, his first supportive gesture in years. He'd called to say he'd bring her to the carnival, that wild horses couldn't keep him away from seeing what I'd built. Marcus stayed with me, holding me, as I alternated between anxiety and excitement. "You've created something beautiful," he whispered in the darkness. "Tomorrow, everyone will see who you really are." Not Madison's rejected sister, but Angelina Thompson, the woman who brings communities together. At dawn on Saturday, I drove to the school. The weather forecast had predicted possible rain for the afternoon, right when Madison's outdoor ceremony was scheduled. I tried not to find satisfaction in that, but I was only human. Volunteers started arriving at 7, and by 8, the school grounds were transforming. Booths went up, decorations were hung, the smell of food preparation filled the air. The vintage cars started arriving, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun. Each owner had a story, a connection to the community, a reason for being there, beyond just displaying their vehicle. By 10, when we officially opened, the line of people waiting to enter stretched around the block. The suggested donation was $5, but people were giving 20s, 50s, some even writing checks for hundreds. Everyone wanted to be part of something special. Sarah Williams and her camera crew arrived early, interviewing volunteers, capturing the joy on children's faces, the sense of community that permeated everything. She pulled me aside to tell me they'd be broadcasting live segments throughout the day. "This is what real celebration looks like," she said. "Not exclusive, but inclusive. Not about status, but about heart." At noon, something unexpected happened. Beth arrived with 5 other cousins, all dressed casually, all smiling. "We were supposed to be at the wedding," she said. "But when we heard about this, we knew where we really belonged. Family shows up for family, right?" The tears I'd been holding back all day finally fell as my real family. The ones who chose love over status surrounded me with hugs. The contrast between the two events became apparent as the day progressed. Beth had her phone out receiving real-time updates from a cousin who'd decided to attend Madison's wedding to report back. By 2 in the afternoon, when Madison's outdoor ceremony was beginning, dark clouds had gathered over the Whitmore estate. Here at the carnival, the sun shone brilliantly. The attendance had exceeded all expectations, with over 1,000 people exploring the booths, enjoying the food, admiring the vintage cars. Children's laughter filled the air, mixing with live music from the high school jazz band. The local radio station had set up a booth broadcasting live from what they were calling the event of the season. At 2:30, Beth showed me a text. The rain had started at the estate just as Madison was walking down the aisle. Not a gentle sprinkle, but a sudden downpour that sent guests scrambling for cover. The tent they'd erected as backup was insufficient, and apparently one side had collapsed under the weight of the water. Madison's $20,000 designer dress was soaked, the train torn, when she tried to run for shelter. I didn't celebrate her misfortune, but there was something poetic about nature itself, rejecting the superficial perfection she'd tried to create. Meanwhile, at the carnival, Marcus had just taken the main stage, asking for everyone's attention. My heart started racing as he called Emma and me up to join him. Emma bounded up the stairs wearing the special dress we'd bought for the carnival, her face glowing with excitement. Marcus took the microphone, his usually confident voice trembling slightly with emotion. "Angelina Thompson," he began, "you've shown this entire community what real grace looks like. You've turned rejection into triumph, hurt into healing, exclusion into the biggest inclusion celebration this town has ever seen. You've shown Emma that a woman's worth isn't measured by others' opinions, but by the love she gives and the lives she touches." He dropped to one knee, pulling out a small velvet box. Emma was bouncing beside him, no longer able to contain her excitement. The crowd fell silent, 1,000 people holding their breath. "I've been planning this with your amazing daughter for weeks," he continued, tears now running down his face. "Emma helped me pick the ring, insisted it had to be perfect for her perfect mom. Angel, you've already made me the luckiest man alive just by letting me love you. Will you make me even luckier? Will you marry me?" The ring was his grandmother's, a vintage piece with a modest diamond surrounded by sapphires. It was perfect, not because of its monetary value, but because of what it represented: generations of love commitment through hardship, and the belief that family was about choice, not blood. Through my tears, I said yes, and the crowd erupted. Emma jumped into our arms, and we stood there, the 3 of us, as cheers and applause washed over us. Sarah Williams was right there with her camera, broadcasting our joy to the entire region. Marcus wasn't done with surprises. His garage buddies had restored a 1968 Mustang convertible as an engagement gift. It sat gleaming in the center of the car show, white with blue racing stripes, a huge bow on the hood. He'd been working on it in secret for months. He explained, wanting to give me something that represented new beginnings. The mayor arrived at 3, just as Beth received word that only half of Madison's expected guests had shown up to the wedding. Apparently, the Wellington Family Society friends had chosen to attend other events, sensing perhaps that the social tide was turning. The mayor gave an impromptu speech at our carnival, praising the community spirit and announcing that the city would be honoring me with a citizenship award for outstanding service. By 4 o'clock, we'd raised $32,000 for the school, far exceeding our $10,000 goal. Local news channels beyond Channel 7 had picked up the story, and Angelina's carnival was trending on social media. People were sharing photos, videos, and stories about what real community looked like. Then came the biggest surprise of the day. At 4:30, a familiar Bentley pulled into the parking lot. Eleanor Wellington emerged dressed in casual elegance rather than wedding finery. She walked through the carnival, observing everything with sharp eyes, before approaching me at the volunteer booth. "Ms. Thompson," she said loud enough for others to hear, "I must apologize. I've been testing the wrong person all along. You see, I wanted to know who my son was really marrying, what kind of family he was joining. I set certain challenges, made certain demands, to see if Madison would stand up for family, for loyalty, for what really matters." She paused, looking around at the carnival at Marcus, with his arm around me at Emma, playing with other children. "She failed every test," Eleanor continued. "She chose status over sister image, over integrity. When I suggested maintaining certain standards for the guest list, I expected her to defend you, to say family comes first. Instead, she eagerly agreed and even suggested excluding you herself. That told me everything I needed to know about her character." Eleanor handed me a check for $25,000 for the school, then leaned in closer. "I've withdrawn my family's financial support for their honeymoon and future ventures. Christopher needed to learn this lesson too. Choosing a partner based on their willingness to abandon family for status means you'll be abandoned yourself when convenience demands it." As Eleanor's Bentley pulled away, my phone buzzed with a call from Madison. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Her voice was hysterical, screaming about how I'd ruined everything, how I'd somehow made it rain, how I'd turned Eleanor against her, how I'd stolen her thunder with my pathetic carnival. "Madison," I said calmly, when she paused for breath, "I didn't do anything to you. I simply lived my life when you decided I wasn't good enough for yours. The rain was weather, not revenge. Eleanor made her own choices based on your actions, not mine. And this carnival isn't about you at all. It's about community love and the family we choose." "You planned this," she screamed. "You deliberately scheduled it for my wedding day." "The carnival has been scheduled for this Saturday in May for 20 years, I replied. "You chose this date knowing that. But Madison, I genuinely hope you can find happiness with Christopher. I hope you can build a life that brings you joy. But that life won't include me anymore. You made that choice and I've accepted it." I hung up as she started screaming again. Marcus took my phone, turned it off, and pulled me back to the carnival, where real celebration continued. As the sun set, the carnival took on a magical quality. String lights illuminated the booths, the vintage cars gleamed under spotlights, and families danced to the live band that had volunteered to play. Emma fell asleep in Marcus's arms, exhausted from excitement and joy. I stood there, surrounded by hundreds of people who'd shown up for me, for us, for community. Beth sidled up beside me with final intelligence from the wedding. The reception had been moved indoors due to the weather, but the damage was done. Madison's perfect hair and makeup were ruined. The photographs would all show bedraggled guests, and the sophisticated garden party atmosphere she'd planned was impossible in the hotel's generic ballroom. Several guests had left early, and Christopher's family was conspicuously absent from the reception. But more importantly, Beth said, "Everyone's talking about the carnival, about your engagement, about how the whole town came together. The wedding feels hollow, like a stage set with no soul. Madison might have gotten her exclusive event, but you got something money can't buy: genuine love and respect." The weeks following the carnival and wedding revealed the true extent of the shift in our family dynamics. Madison and Christopher cut their honeymoon short, returning after just 3 days, instead of the planned 2 weeks in Bora Bora. The Wellington family had indeed withdrawn their financial support, leaving the newlyweds to foot the bill themselves. I heard through Beth that Christopher was furious about the embarrassment, the poor turnout, and especially his mother's very public support of my carnival. He blamed Madison for mishandling the situation, for creating a scandal where there didn't need to be one. Their marriage, built on image and status rather than genuine connection, was already showing cracks. Meanwhile, my life flourished in ways I'd never imagined. The school board was so impressed with the carnival's success and my leadership that they offered me the position of assistant principal. It came with a significant salary increase and the opportunity to implement new programs for struggling families in our district. Marcus's business experienced an unexpected boom. The exposure from the carnival and our engagement story brought in dozens of new customers who wanted to support a good man and his shop. He hired 2 additional mechanics and started planning to open a second location. He also began a program offering free car maintenance for single parents, inspired by our own journey. Emma thrived in the attention and love surrounding our family. Her confidence soared, and her teachers noticed marked improvement in her already strong academic performance. She started telling everyone about her upcoming new dad and how he was teaching her about engines and cars. The wedding we were planning would be small, intimate, and perfect, everything Madison's wasn't. Dorothy's attempt at reconciliation came 3 weeks after the carnival. She called on a Tuesday evening, her voice strained and formal. "Angelina, I've been doing some thinking. Perhaps I was hasty in my judgment. The whole town is talking about your carnival, about how wonderful you were. The Mayor's Citizenship Award is quite an honor. I didn't realize you had such standing in the community. The fact that she only reached out after seeing external validation of my worth told me everything." She hadn't had a change of heart about me as a person. She'd simply realized she'd backed the wrong horse. Madison's social climb had stalled while mine was ascending. "I appreciate you calling Mom," I said carefully, "but I need you to understand something. My worth didn't change when the mayor gave me an award, or when the carnival succeeded. I was the same person when you agreed I wasn't good enough for Madison's wedding. The only thing that's changed is your perception, and that's not enough anymore." She tried to argue, to explain, to justify, but I held firm. I told her she was welcome to have a relationship with Emma, supervised and on my terms, but that I needed distance to heal from her betrayal. The woman who should have defended me had instead confirmed my worst fears about my worth in her eyes. 3 months after the wedding, the other shoe dropped. A lawyer contacted me about Grandma Rose's trust fund. Eleanor Wellington, it turned out, had connections in the legal world and had helped expedite an investigation into Madison's handling of my inheritance. They discovered she'd been using legal but unethical tactics to delay disbursement while collecting interest. The $50,000, plus 3 years of interest, was transferred to my account within a week. I immediately set aside $30,000 for Emma's college fund, used $10,000 for a down payment on a small house near the school, and put the rest into savings. The financial security I'd never had suddenly materialized not through Madison's connections or Mom's approval, but through my own perseverance and the support of those who truly loved me. Madison attempted one last manipulation 6 months after her wedding. She showed up at my classroom after school looking perfectly put together, but with something hollow in her eyes. Her marriage was struggling, she admitted. Christopher resented her for the wedding disaster, for his mother's disapproval, for the social mockery they'd endured. She needed family support, she said. She suggested we could put the past behind us, that sisters should stick together. Then she mentioned that Eleanor Wellington had been singing my praises at social events, that having a connection to me might actually help repair her standing. So that was it. I'd become useful to her, and therefore worthy of her attention again. I looked at this woman I'd once idolized, this sister I'd spent years trying to please, and felt nothing but pity. "Madison," I said gently, "you made a choice. You decided I wasn't good enough for your world. Now that your world has shifted, you can't just invite me back in when convenient. I wish you well, but we're not sisters anymore. We're strangers who happen to share DNA." She tried tears, anger, guilt, every manipulation in her arsenal, but I'd grown immune to her tactics. Marcus and Emma were waiting for me at our new home, where we'd planted a garden and painted Emma's room purple, her favorite color. That was my real life, my chosen family. As Madison left my classroom, she turned one last time. "You know I always loved you, right? I just wanted better for you." "No, Madison," I replied. "You wanted different for me. I already had better. I had love, community, purpose, and a daughter who sees me as her hero. That's worth more than all the Wellington money in the world." Our wedding took place a year after the carnival on the same spring Saturday. We held it at the school, transforming the gymnasium into a wonderland of flowers and lights. Emma was my maid of honor. Marcus's nephew was his best man. The entire community attended, filling the space with genuine joy and celebration. Eleanor Wellington sent a generous gift and a card that read, "This is what a classy wedding looks like." She'd become an unexpected ally, regularly donating to the school and even attending Emma's school plays. She'd seen through Madison's facade to the emptiness beneath, while recognizing the authentic life I'd built. Madison and Christopher divorced 2 years later. Without the Wellington money and connections, their relationship had no foundation. Madison moved to Seattle, starting over in a new city where no one knew her history. Mom followed her, unable to admit she'd chosen wrong, unwilling to repair the bridge she'd helped burn with me. But their absence from our lives became a blessing rather than a loss. Emma grew up surrounded by Marcus's warm, welcoming family, by the school community that had embraced us, by friends who became the aunts and uncles she deserved. She learned that family isn't about blood or obligation, but about choosing to show up for each other. 5 years after that carnival, I stood in my office as the newly appointed principal of Riverside Elementary. The walls were covered with photos from that magical day, the carnival, the proposal, the community that had rallied around us. Marcus and I had added 2 more children to our family, twin boys, who carried on the tradition of kindness and inclusion we'd built. Emma, now 12 and wise beyond her years, asked me once if I ever missed Aunt Madison and Grandma Dorothy. I told her the truth, that I missed who I'd hoped they would be, but not who they actually were. Sometimes I explained the greatest gift someone can give you is showing you who they really are, even if it hurts, because it frees you to find the people who will love you properly. That spring day when Madison texted that I wasn't invited to her classy wedding had felt like the end of everything. But it was actually the beginning of understanding my worth wasn't determined by others' opinions, the beginning of building a family based on love rather than blood, the beginning of a life more beautiful than anything Madison's money could have bought. The carousel of seasons continues to turn. Every spring we hold the carnival, now renamed the Community Unity Festival. It's become a regional attraction, drawing thousands of people who come not just for the festivities, but for what it represents: the triumph of inclusion over exclusion, of community over exclusivity, of genuine love over performed perfection. Last week I received a letter from Madison. She's remarried to a tech entrepreneur this time and wanted to introduce him to her family. She suggested we could start fresh, that enough time had passed. She included a photo of herself at some gala, draped in designer clothes, standing beside a man who looked as hollow as Christopher had. I didn't respond. Instead, I hung a new photo in my office, our family at last year's carnival. Marcus and I are 3 children, surrounded by hundreds of friends and community members. Everyone is laughing, painted with face paint, holding cotton candy, radiating joy. That's my family. That's my classy life. Sometimes the people who claim to love us most are the ones who see us least clearly. They try to force us into boxes that make them comfortable, shame us for not meeting standards they've created to maintain their own superiority. But when we refuse to shrink ourselves to fit their narrow definitions, when we dare to live authentically despite their rejection, we discover something profound. We find that rejection isn't always loss. Sometimes it's redirection. Madison's text uninviting me from her wedding wasn't an ending, but a beginning. It freed me from years of seeking approval from people who would never give it, from measuring my worth by someone else's ruler, from believing that blood alone makes family. That spring day taught me that when family treats you as not good enough for their table, you don't beg for crumbs. You build your own feast and invite those who saw your worth all along. My sister wanted a classy wedding without me. She got it while I got something priceless, a community that chose me, a partner who adores me, and the knowledge that I was already more than enough. So to everyone watching who's ever felt excluded by family, who's been told they're not good enough, who's had to watch from the outside while others celebrate without them, know this: your worth isn't diminished by their blindness. Your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see it. And sometimes, just sometimes, their rejection is the universe's way of redirecting you toward the people who will celebrate you properly. Thank you for joining me in sharing this journey. Have you ever experienced family rejection that led to something better? How did you find your chosen family when your blood family let you down? Please share your stories in the comments below. They might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to hear more stories about triumph over adversity. Share this with anyone who needs a reminder that they're already enough exactly as they are. Remember, you don't need anyone's permission to live a beautiful life. You just need the courage to build it yourself. Until next time, this is Angelina reminding you that the best revenge against those who said you weren't good enough is a life so well lived that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Thank you for being part of my chosen family. Take care of yourselves and each other.